deeper now into these new revelations. Joining me here in Washington, Steve Hayes, senior writer for the Weekly Standard, and in New York tonight, Tom Joscelyn, a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, who also has a piece on the Weekly Standard website tonight about this. Gentlemen, thanks for being here. Tom, I want to start with you about these documents. We've reported on them before. You all are the reason, Tom and Steve, that we are focused on this. But back in May of 2011, Tom Donilon, then National Security Advisor, said this: "This is the largest cache of intelligence derived from the scene of any single terrorist. It's about the size, the CIA tells us, of a small college library." These are the documents retrieved from Abbottabad, where bin Laden was killed. Yet we only have seen, as you heard, 17 of these. The rest of them are just starting to come out. Tell us why we have new ones now.
Well, we have new ones now because they're being used by prosecutors in a trial in Brooklyn, and the prosecutors find that it's necessary to use these documents to get a conviction in that case. And in fact, we've seen that in Germany and elsewhere, where bin Laden's documents keep popping up in these trials because he was still very much invested in the network. He was still managing the network of terrorists around the globe. And this directly contradicts what the administration said in May 2012. You quoted Tom Donilon from May 2011. Just 1 year later, the administration flipped the script. They basically came out with this whole idea that Osama bin Laden was a lion in winter. He was in retirement. He was basically doing nothing. And that's just not true. You can see in these documents in Brooklyn, you can even see in the documents they released previously, that he was still very much actively managing an international network of terrorists.
And you're talking to more than 1 million documents, Tom. I mean, this is, we don't even actually know what else is in there, do we?
No. I mean, we know 1.5 million is the number our sources have given to us. I'm confident in that number. But here's the bottom line. This administration says they're the most transparent administration in history. They released 17 documents out of 1.5 million. And in fact, they said that they were being transparent in releasing those. But we don't find this an act of transparency at all. What we find is that this came along with a narrative about our terrorist enemies. And we really should see more of the evidence in those files. And let's see if their narrative holds up. We don't think it will.
Steve, the pressing issue now is about Iran and the revelation of how close Iran has worked with al-Qaeda, harboring al-Qaeda, financing al-Qaeda. This administration has even talked about that, but it just doesn't get covered.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the administration in several designations of senior terrorists working for al-Qaeda, as well as terrorists and ministries that are part of the government of Iran, have previously identified this. The president and the senior administration officials, though, haven't made much of these designations. But it's very clear that Iran and al-Qaeda had a relationship, a secret agreement by which al-Qaeda officials could transit through Iran, they could train in Iran, they had safe haven in Iran. There was some times at which al-Qaeda personnel were treated as if they were in some sort of loose form of house arrest, but their restriction of movement wasn't very significant. And in these newest batch of documents that was just out this week, as Tom reported, you have al-Qaeda officials, senior al-Qaeda officials, saying, in effect, we can go to Iran if we want to. We can spend 3 months there. We can train 6 to 8 brothers to plot attacks on the West from Iran.
Take a listen to the former head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, Lieutenant General Mike Flynn, on Charlie Rose recently.
I would segment out Iran because Iran is actually part of the problem. Iran is a deep part of the problem. Iran is a state sponsor of terrorists.
ISIS is Sunni.
Iran has killed more Americans than al-Qaeda has through state sponsors, through their terrorist network called Hezbollah. So we have to recognize that this is a very dangerous, I think, a very dangerous country.
Tom, I mean, all of these intelligence officials know this stuff about Iran, and yet there is this decoupling, if you will, in this negotiation process.
Yeah, I mean, President Obama has assumed, according to reporting in the Wall Street Journal, that basically Iran can be our partner, or we can enter into some kind of de facto alliance with al-Qaeda against al-Qaeda throughout the region. But that's just not the case. In fact, you can see in the administration's own documents, starting in July 2011, but on 4 separate occasions from the Treasury Department, and then a whole host of times from the State Department, that in fact Iran continues to harbor, continues to provide safe haven to al-Qaeda, and they know that al-Qaeda is shuttling fighters through Iran all over the globe, including to the West.
And Steve, the other big deal, and it's hard to overstate the importance of these documents. The other thing in here is the presence of bin Laden reaching out to these affiliates and these smaller groups, and how much control he really had.
Yeah, it's fascinating just in the small glimpse that we've seen of these documents. And you're right. I mean, you're talking about 17 now with the release of these, maybe 20 documents out of a pool of 1.5 million. It's insane that we haven't seen more of those. But just in what we have seen, it's become very clear that Osama bin Laden was very active in controlling the way that al-Qaeda worked and answering requests from the franchises, from the al-Qaeda offshoots, and helping to empower the different franchises, Boko Haram in Nigeria, al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula and Yemen, and elsewhere, shifting resources, shifting senior leaders, core al-Qaeda leaders, as the administration likes to call them, out to these franchises to give them more power, to allow them to sort of rebuild and flourish, and that's what we're fighting right now.
Steve and Tom, great reporting. We will follow it here. We'll see if other media organizations do. Thanks a lot for coming in.